Yeah. So mandala is very grand. It's vast, it's deep, it's really infinite. But I think for the most, common people, for lay people, I think the easiest way to understand the principle of mandala is, okay, so there's something called chaos, chaos. And then juxtaposing that is something called orderly, right? So here, table, chair, all these are orderly. Now, balancing these two, actually going beyond chaos and order is what we want. That's what we need to aim. So the word mandala has this connotation of the rim, the parameter, and the center, but together. You see, this is very paradoxical. Because usually when we talk about the center, we are not talking about the parameter or the boundary, the edge. In our dualistic mind, we have this idea that, oh, the middle has to be in the middle. The moment the word middle is used, then you are always thinking here, not here. But the mandala is not really like that. There's no middle, there's no parameter, there's no edge. It's just, it's one. So with that in mind, the chaos. So in one way, okay, you can approach like this way. Actually, the fundamental cause of all our pain, our suffering, our dissatisfaction is trying to make an order out of chaos. Not being able to appreciate the chaos. Trying to make something, because what it does is it sort of deprives you from spontaneity. It deprives you from being genuine and being not contrived. Basically fabricated, lots of fabricated situation arise. So anyway, so this is one way to look at something called mandala. So now how do we know this? Okay, if you look at some of this traditional classic painting or the structure of the mandala, you will have, let's say, a Buddha such as Vairocana in the middle, and then surrounded by all the retinue, so many of them, at times, so many. But then as you explore them, we will hear things like okay, so central deity is in the middle, let's say, and the retinue deity, one of the retinue deity is, let's say, on the east. So suddenly when you move your mind, let's say, visualization to the east, that is the center. So the principal, sort of the boss deity, right, the king, is no more a king. Because this is exactly what the Tantra is trying to tell you, that there is no hierarchy. Because hierarchy, again, remember I was telling you, it's orderly. In reality, there is no such thing as higher being, lower being, you understand? So, yeah, this is what mandala should be really conveying. But, most of the ordinary people don't think like that. In fact, the opposite. Now we think of mandala as in, oh, that is the east part of the mandala, that's white, this is the south part of the mandala, usually is the yellow, so on and so forth. But if you go deeper into the mandala, it's not really like that. Both in Buddhism and also in Hinduism, you will find this a lot. For instance, like in Hindu, often when you hear things like, oh, Shiva is the mightiest. But then you also hear at some stories, oh, the Kali, you know, without the Kali, Shiva is nothing, like that. All this kind of contradictory. You know, the retinue deity becomes the principal deity. Principal become the, you know, like the retinue of the earlier retinue, so on and so forth. Basically, east, west, south, north, all that is just a fabrication. There is no such thing as east. There is no such thing as west. This is what is being taught in the mandala. So I think probably this much is maybe understandable by the sort of the ordinary people. Otherwise, you know, quite big. Okay. Vairochana Buddha is one of the 5 Buddha family. Now, okay, again, I'm speaking to, let's say I'm speaking to, you know, just any Tom, Dick, Harry, which is difficult. It's not like there is actually some 5 Buddhas sitting somewhere there. So basically the 5 Buddha are 5 elements, 5 what do you call it, object of consciousness, which is like form, let's say. So form is the object of eye consciousness. Sound, like the music, that is so the sound. Okay, so usually sound is the Amitabha Buddha. Okay, it again changes. Okay, but generally Vairochana Buddha is always the form. So anything that is a form, color, shape, you know, like these buildings, color, this is all Vairochana. This is most beautifully explained in one sutra, where it's really beautiful. It talks about Vairochana, the shape of the Vairochana, so, and the signs. So this is how they explain. So Vairochana Buddha is like this. He's sitting here, and on his hand rests a begging bowl. On top of the begging bowl are 25 lotus flowers sitting on each other, okay? And counting from the top, you know, counting from the top. Now this is something that I forgot. One of the flowers is one universe, and in this universe there's a planet called Fearless Planet, and this is where we are. Okay, so it's very, you know, like there's a lot of story going on like that. Now then it gets very, again, like many tantric teaching, it talks about how this Vairochana Buddha is just so big. Just imagine, you know, one lotus is just the whole universe, and one of them is our world. So then in each pore, his body is that whole set. And it talks about how even then the original Vairochana hasn't become bigger to fit in, you know. And this Buddha field, the whole set that is in, you remember, inside his paw, they're not like small, tiny, minute, trying to fit in a paw. So see, we are now talking about that. how shape, color, size is just so depriving. The idea of size, idea of color, idea of shape is actually making you poor. You are stuck with things like, oh, white, yellow, green, square, rectangle. It's just infinite. So that, I think, is probably the easiest to introduce Vairocana. That's it. The mantra I recited is called Dependent Arising Mantra, which basically, you know, in Buddhism, fundamental view is that everything is dependent arising. Nothing comes accidentally. Nothing is created by some almighty creator. Things appears when there's a cause and condition. So fundamentally, it's very important to be aware of cause and condition. Therefore, you kind of fiddle around with the cause and condition, if you like. Maybe the most mundane way of putting it. You try to monitor, be conscious of cause and condition, so that the result will be favorable for the time being, but ultimately the result will be liberating for yourself and others. So this dependent arising mantra is actually quite a popular mantra that you can find in the Theravada tradition, also in the Mahayana tradition, and obviously in the Vajrayana tradition. Followed with this dependent arising mantra, I've also recited 3 auspicious words which was actually uttered by Buddha himself, where Buddha said that there are 3 things that appeared on this earth that is the most auspicious, which is an enlightened, awakened being appeared on earth, meaning the Buddha came. That's the first auspicious. The second auspicious is that he taught. There is a teaching. And then the third auspicious is that there is actually a living community that upholds that teaching. So these are the 3 auspicious words that are very, very popular, both in the sutras and the mantra. So that's what I'm chanting. Okay.
Slowly. Okay, stop.
Sumba is an island that is part of the province of Eastern Nusa Tenggara in Indonesia. It is located between the islands of Komodo and Sumbawa and directly facing the Indian Ocean. That's why the island is also known as a surfer paradise. The villagers in Sumba still pay homage to their ancestor in the ancient belief of Marapu that is now officially acknowledged by the government as part of the religion in Indonesia, and have retained most of the indigenous culture and traditions for generations to generations. The island is also known for the prestigious art of tenun ikat hand-woven fabric and become the origin of the strong and agile Sumba ponies or sandalwood horses. That's why the symbol of horses and other animals become very strong appears in the tenun ikat fabric that is produced by the women in the island. Even though Sumba also connected to the Western civilization through the process of colonialism of Portuguese and the Dutch, but it is known also that the people in Sumba, they are still doing very interesting efforts and rituals that is connected to the ancient of Marapu belief. They have many festivals called Pasola or other festival in smaller villages throughout the islands where all the women usually wear different ikats and also using the ikat as part of the culture and the identity of people in Sumba. In many villages also we can see the stone megalithic tombs where we can see the sculpture of different animals like crocodile or scorpions and other. Even through West Sumba in Waikabuba, we can see many different rituals following the ancient of Marapu belief. In Sumba, we follow the journey of Nancy Dwi Ratna and also Mama Ataratu, the two main persons that helped us to realize this project. Following the collaboration between CHARWEI TSAI and Nancy, when we visited Sumba in 2020 in early March. At that time, we wanted to see the making of traditional fabric that is very famous in Sumba, especially in East Sumba. So we went to Waingapu and we met Nancy that I knew her before from previous project. And I heard that Nancy now developing a new community where she gathered the mothers around her area to work together in her studio, making the new style or new forms of Sumbanese fabric or textile. For me, it is interesting also how the interwoven between the contemporary background from CHARWEI TSAI, also with her background as an artist coming from Taiwan and her own culture and her contemporaneity, cosmopolitanism, meeting with the sense from Nancy that mostly lives in Sumba most of her time. When Nancy met with CHARWEI in March 2020, it's not really we talk directly about the collaboration, but I brought around CHARWEI to see the different methods, different approach of making textile and how Sumbanese textile also developed from time to time. So at that time, we visited many traditional villages and we met with many different weavers, including some of them the men who live in the traditional village. So weaving actually not only the work of women or mothers, but also done by the men in Sumba.
Saya akan menjelaskan proses pembuatan tenun ikat Sumba Timur secara garis besar dan singkat dalam proyek ini. Yang pertama, material yang saya gunakan adalah handspun, sehingga proses pembuatan tenun kali ini mengalami kerumitan lebih banyak dikarenakan material handspun akan menimbulkan efek berbulu pada setiap helainya. Maka saya melakukan proses kawu, yaitu memasak tepung tapioka menjadi kental agar berfungsi membuat benang menjadi lebih kaku dan kuat sehingga tidak berbulu dan tidak mudah putus. Benang akan dilanjutkan ke proses kap bukul, atau proses penggulungan benang, kemudian masuk ke proses pamening atau menghani, yaitu mengatur benang helai demi helai pada suatu alat yang disebut wangi pamening sesuai dengan panjang dan lebar yang ditentukan. Setelah proses pamening, kita masuk ke tahap karandi, yaitu mengikat benang per kelompok atau yang biasa kita sebut dengan putu. Dalam hal ini satu kelompok menjadi 8 helai atau putu 8. Kita akan masuk pada tahap pengencangan benang yang akan dipasang pada alat dan akan diberi jeda 1 minggu agar benang menjadi jenuh dan tidak akan menyusut atau memuai. Tahap karandi benang pada batang bambu kecil per putu agar gambar menjadi rapi sesuai dengan hitungan putu atau karandi. Setelah itu benang sudah bisa digambar sesuai dengan motif yang diinginkan.
From Nancy's side, as a weaver who comes from very strong tradition of making textile in Sumba, I think her meeting and collaboration with CHARWEI also give her different perspective of making art. It's not that we push or we encounter Nancy's tradition only with the contemporary, but it's a natural meeting where Nancy also see the textile or the traditional form that usually she made can be seen as a contemporary piece. I think it is important also to look into Nancy's contributions in the meaning, in the construction of the meaning in CHARWEI's work, because they discuss a lot about the different animals and different symbols and visual signs that been important part of the Sumbanese tradition. In Sumba, people believe in many animals. In every animals, they have their own meaning, they have their own role in the belief of Merapu. So it is interesting also how CHARWEI try to use the symbol that is significant, that is relevant with the context of Sumba, and put in her own project in the contemporary context, and making different narrative that is still connected with her roots in all the roots of the textile. One of most important symbols that came up in many fabrics that had been resulted from this collaboration is the form of scorpions. It is interesting also to look into the role of scorpion in the belief of Merapu, where Nancy explains that scorpion means regeneration, means also to lead to eternity. Scorpions mean also how the young people or young tradition can be connected to the older generation or older tradition and making bridge and dialogue between the two different things. So scorpion in this context of CHARWEI's work in the contemporary art world, I think also interesting to look into how our society evolve and resolve in many different situations, and particularly this exhibition happening just right after we have the pandemic during 2020, and how the process of making, the process of discussing during the production of the work also impacted by the COVID-19. I think it is important to look again into the idea of regeneration after we have losing many older generation in our society. So what is the meaning of regeneration? What is the meaning of new hope? What is the meaning of new meaning or new life itself after we experience the death? So I think, yeah, this collaboration will be very fruitful for Nancy and her community working in Waingapu in East Sumba, and to see the possibility into future collaborations and how they develop the tradition, they develop the belief, they develop the references into the contemporary situation. We visit Ataratu, that we call her as Mama Ataratu. That's how we call the older people or the older women in Sumba, to record some of her songs. Ataratu is one of the most well-known singer, traditional singer, that singing while playing junga, one of the traditional instruments in Sumba. Many people believe that figures like Mama Ataratu is very rare to be visible now, since most of the junga players, they are male. It is interesting also that Mama Artaratu spontaneously created her song, responding to every emotion and every event that she seems like interested and engaged in her everyday life. When we visited Mama Artaratu, we also discussed about the recent problem faced by the villagers in her area. She mentioned that most of the lands and also the places where they live now being in the conflict, since the officer of the villages, they want to sell those lands and island to the investor that willing to build sugar factory in Sumba, one of the biggest in the eastern part of Indonesia. Mama Artaratu mentioned that for people in Merapu's belief, it is forbidden to sell their lands because the land should be the place where the heritage or the belief, their culture and identity to the next generation. That's why many people in Sumbanis, they still have very large amount of lands, and that will be heritages to their family and the next generations. Mama Artaratu then created a song that is beautifully depicts, but at the same time also showing the sad story of the impact of modernism and developmentalism in the island like Sumba, where the marginalized people living in the village, they don't really feel the wealth coming from the developmental, but mostly they are suffering because they lost the land, they lost the animals, and also they are in the confusing position of their identity. After we met with Mama Artaratu, we heard the stories on how land and agrarian conflicts started to appear in Sumba area because of the developments and establishment of the new factories. From the song created by Mama Artaratu, we learn how the people lives in Sumba with their Merapu beliefs. They still depended on the local tradition, local beliefs, and local knowledge. We start to think on the direction of our project. We decide to use all the materials in this project with 100% natural materials, without chemical and without machine, not only to think about the local tradition, but also we think about how the people in Merapu believe in the circle of life. What we grow in the end is what we use, what we eat, and what keeps us alive till the end. They still believe that this Merapu is actually the future of mankind.
Монголчууд бид бол эртнээс өвлөн уламжлагдаж ирсэн нүүдэлж ахын соёлтой арддаг юм. Гэвч сүүлийн жилүүдэд шинжлэх ухааны технологи өгцгийн хэрээр хүмүүс сууршмал амьдралд уртцтай шилжиж байна. Үүний үр дүнд бол хүмүүс уламжлал ахуйгаас олон хүндээрч холдох, мартагдах үйл явц бий болж байна гэж харсан учраас би бол 5 жилийн өмнөөс эхлээд ширмэж ширдгийг хийж эхэлсэн. Ширмэн ширдэг ширх одоо гол үндэс болсон оёх хатгах эрдмийг бол би ээжээсээ суралцсан. Миний ээж бол 25 жил Монгол үндэсний гутлыг бол урлаач хүн. Намайг жоохон байхаас л эхлэн уламжлалт ахуйд танилцуулж аливааг чанартай сайн гүйцэтгэхийг бол ээж маань зааж сургасан. ухаалаг хүн байсан. Миний ширмэр ширдэг хийдэг гол түүхий болох эсхийг бол бид нар Монгол хүмүүнийхээ ноосоор хийдэг. Хоньныхоо ноосыг усаар норгож нүүдэлчдийн уламжлалт арга болох эсхийг хийх аргаар бол хийдэг. За ингэж бэлэн болгож авсан эсхийн дээрээ бид нар өөрсдийнхөө уламжлал өв соёлыг тусгасан амьдрал ахуйдаа өдөр тутмын хэрэгэлдэг хээ агуулцуудыг бол дээр нь дүрслээд тэрийг ноос утсаараа дээр нь ширж өгдөг. Өөрийнхөө сэтгэлийн ур, гарын ур, ухааны урыг шингээж ойдог. Орчин үеийн эрэлт хэрэгцээ шаардлагат нийцсэн 100% эко бүтээгдэхүүн болж өгдөг. За ингээд энэ ширмлээ ширж явах хэрэгтэй бол маш их тайлбарлыг авдаг, дулаахан энергийг авдаг. За би анх удаа хот мандал буюу цагийн хурдыг эсхийн дээр ширж ойсон нь энэ төслийн гол онцлог нь байлаа. За шин цагийг бэлтгэсэн бурхан шашны ойлголт гэж сонсож байсан учраас бүтээлээ хийж явах явцад надад цаг хугацааны талаар бясалгаж тойрог хэлбэрийн бүтээлийн тухай буюу нарны тухай, уйхан замбуудын наран гэх агуу хүртийн дууны тухай санаанд буужуулаа. Нүүдэлчдийн өнгөрсөн одоо ирээдүйгээд цаг хугацааны тухай ойлголт бол тэр чигээрээ хот, гариг, эрхэс, нар, сар, газар тэнгэртэй салшгүй холбоотой байжээ гэдгийг ойлгож авсан.